Have you ever had a game that felt like a bad omen, where every time you tried to play it, life just got in the way? Well, that was me in the BioShock franchise for several years. When I first played the game on PC back in, say, 2010, 2011, I managed to get to Arcadia before I got insanely busy and eventually forgot what I was doing in the first place. Every time I booted the game afterwards, something happened that made me stop playing. Now is the time for me to sit down and finish this. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. My name is Ty with MojoPlays, and I am here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the time in his short life? No, says the high school principal, it belongs to education. No, says the retail manager, it belongs to the store's timesheet. No, says Ricky, it belongs to Monster Hunter. I rejected those answers, and instead I chose something different. I chose BioShock. Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. And if you want to see what else I'm playing, or have a suggestion for a future retro review, hit me up on Twitter at GhostWriterTyler. For your reference, I played BioShock Remastered on PlayStation 5, as there isn't much difference between the original and remaster outside of graphical upgrades. And I played most of the game on hard difficulty. I'll explain most later on.
Charlie!
BioShock wastes no time throwing you into the game. You are a man named Jack, whose parents told him what a great boy he is, until suddenly, plane crashes, mayday, 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 we're going down, everything is awful. You swim to a nearby lighthouse where you discover the entrance to Rapture, an underwater utopia that turns out to be anything but. With a man named Atlas as your guide, it is up to you to uncover Rapture's downfall and hunt down its creator, the infamous Andrew Ryan. What follows is a journey filled with thought-provoking commentary on various political and social topics. And I'm gonna shut up before I get too deep, or else we'll be here all day. As you explore Rapture, you'll find an assortment of weapons you could find in most other first-person shooters. Your ordinary pistol, a shotgun, maybe an assault rifle, or in this case a Tommy gun, nice, and a few specialties like a flamethrower and crossbow. However, BioShock gives you another set of tools to interact with the world and fend off the common splicer. Plasmids grant you elemental powers that can aid you in finding rooms filled with goodies, as well as offing enemies in combat in creative ways. Zap enemies into a state of vulnerability and then deal a massive blow on the head with your wrench. Trick them into fighting on your behalf, or burn them alive with a snap of your fingers. Every one of them is remarkably fun to use and encourages you to build your own playstyle as you venture throughout Rapture. However, the game will force you to use the other weapons as you encounter more variants of splicers and big daddies. Not everything will be solved by a couple of shotgun blasts or even electrocuting water, so you'll have to think and adapt quickly.
Light up foes to 1,000 degrees. Warning, fire spreads.
In addition to plasmids, you'll have another tool at your disposal that can grant you damage bonuses, and it comes in an unexpected package. The camera starts out as a simple quest item and could have very easily been a throwaway mechanic, but props to director Ken Levine and his team for incentivizing it and making it extremely useful in the long run. Another feature that really impressed me was how friendly the user interface was. If there's anything I can appreciate in games like this, it's open and direct communication, especially when it comes to things like collectibles that could determine the end of a playthrough, i.e. rescuing or harvesting little sisters. BioShock does an excellent job at informing you of how many little sisters are in the area, making it easy for players to track their progress if they want to go for a particular ending. And much praise to the navigation system. BioShock gives players a crazy taxi-like arrow that directs you to primary objectives. I know it sounds crazy that I'm praising a simple waypoint system, but what BioShock excels in here is that the arrow was never a visual nuisance, unlike most games. Most games these days have a guidance system that ends up removing the player from the world, either by forcing them to constantly refer to the map, or creating a visual mess with arrows and pathways in the world itself. I'm here to play a video game, not menus. The LEGO game's ghost studs, for example, are just a graphical nuisance when you're just trying to explore. I know where I need to go, just let me goof off for a little bit. Skyrim, on the other hand, has a compass that's too simplistic and can be overwhelming when quests are constantly being thrown at you. But BioShock has managed to incorporate something that's easy to refer to and ignore if you want to explore and loot for a bit. Part of what makes the exploration so enjoyable is the level design. BioShock has that sense of place, a philosophy I've often criticized and praised certain games for in the past. What I mean by sense of place is that as the player, I should be able to tell exactly where I am, or at least have some idea thanks to visual cues. Achieving this can be tricky, but in the end it boils down to a mix of color theory, level and environmental design, all the way down to something as seemingly minute as enemy placement. The players should be able to easily identify their surroundings without the need of a map. And BioShock does this exceptionally well as every area is given a particular theme and color palette. There's no way you're going to confuse the blue oceanic docks of Neptune's Bounty with the nature and flora covered Arcadia. It's this design philosophy that has allowed Rapture to resonate with so many players. Speaking of which, Rapture itself is a marvel to behold in both narrative and presentation. Visually, the city is beautiful and full of character, from its various shops and casinos to its neon lights and propaganda posters. From its early 1920s aesthetics to the various audio tapes regarding life before Rapture's downfall, the world very quickly establishes its identity with the player. Even if you play through just the first 10 minutes of the game, you're never going to forget that grand reveal in the submarine, or the first encounter with a Big Daddy. Adding to the immersion is enemy behavior and AI. When not in combat, enemies will be in their own little worlds. Splicers will be seen talking to themselves, often trapped in a past memory, while Big Daddies without little sisters will walk around depressed, desperately banging on porthole tunnels. This mix of AI, visuals, and collectibles helps ingrain an image of Rapture in the player. A Rapture that was once thriving and excited by its own ideas and potential before everything collapsed. Yes, it does make things depressing, and oftentimes disturbing, but each little tidbit of information makes Rapture morbidly fascinating. It almost makes the goofy vending machines come off a little uncanny with their cartoonish commercialized sounds.
Welcome to the Circus of Value!
Now, even though I was enthralled with BioShock's story, level design, AI, and sound design, I did have a few problems towards the end of the game. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil the story. BioShock is one of the few games I believe you should first experience with as little information as possible. One mechanic I have not mentioned yet is hacking, which is really just a Minesweeper-esque minigame that tasks you with uncovering tiles and rearranging pipes before the pipes reach the end of your line. Doing this will allow you to reprogram turrets and cameras, or unlock safes and some locked doors. At first, I didn't mind this. However, after the midway point, hacking becomes extremely luck dependent. It's almost impossible to accurately predict and adjust what layout to give the pipes, as the flow outruns your cursor and replacement speed. Given how important hacking is for your survival in these last few hours, this obscene difficulty became very annoying. Had the difficulty not spiked after Fort Frolic, I would have stocked up on auto hacks much earlier. Adding to my irritation was the frequent spawning of various, more powerful splicers. It reached a point where rooms I had cleared a minute or two ago were getting the same number of beefy splicers spawned back in shortly after. This can disrupt immersion in a logical sense. I mean, come on. If you were in Rapture and took out 7 dudes in a big room, there's no way another horde would appear again a minute or two later. That, my friends, is what a zombie game does. BioShock is a game focused on immersing the player and making them feel like they are in a world that exists or once existed. In that sense, wouldn't you want to convey that realism by not bombarding the player with spawns? I will acknowledge that my experience in this is probably different than most players, as I progressed through most of the game on hard. However, I eventually got fed up during the second to last mission, which, by the way, escort mission, excuse me, and I ended up cranking the difficulty down. And yet, despite all of my grievances in the last few hours of the game, despite all the rage, frustration, and curse words like you wouldn't believe, BioShock was a tremendous treat to experience. With diverse mechanics, brilliant world building through level design and AI behavior, and a friendly user interface, BioShock still manages to stand on its own legs all these years later, and dare I say, it even outshines most modern AAA games. It does so many things well that it makes me eager to play the sequel and BioShock Infinite, and I'm even planning to read the book that inspired it, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. If you haven't already, you need to play BioShock. Even if you've already played it, then play it again. It's actually more chilling when you already know what's coming in the story.
It's alright. I know he'll be an angel soon.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this episode of Retro Review, be sure to check out our other episodes and tell me in the comments which game you'd like to see in a future video.